Hi, this is Professor Deborah McDermott, and this is our first lecture on tribal religions. This lecture goes with the Introduction to World Religions class, REL 2300. Ideally, if you're a student in this class, you have already read Chapter 2 in our textbook, Invitation to the World Religions. Ideally, you have also already looked through the PowerPoint. The best way to watch or listen to this video is to have the PowerPoint open, have your book open, and have the video in its own screen as well. Now, these first couple of dates I'm going to mention are not part of the tribal religion chapter. These are general dates that you should understand for this course. Now, the first aspect is to understand the terminology or what we use when we're referring to our calendar. We use the phrase BCE, which stands for before the Common Era, and CE for the Common Era. Now, the reason we use this isn't just because it's something that's politically correct, it's the fact that it's accurate. It's accurate to the calendar we use today. It is the year, well, at this moment, 2017. So this idea of BCE and CE aligns with that generally accepted calendar. Now, just as a note, in regards to BC and AD, if we were to actually look at the figure of Jesus, he wasn't born in year 0 or year 1 of the Common Era. He was born about 4 BCE, give or take a year or 2. So it is more accurate to our standard calendar to use BCE and CE. Now, when we talk about tribal religions, or the history of religions and cultures, we have to acknowledge a couple of different time periods. Now, what will be a major turning point in these time periods is the year 8000 BCE. Now, anything before 8000 BCE, whether it's 9000 BCE or 60,000 BCE, is referred to as primal. Now, this idea of primal, this label, tends to mean that the culture, the religion, is of a group of people that is nomadic. They're traveling around. As such, they have a smaller population. They tend to be hunters and gatherers. There's usually only one religious leader. They tend to be egalitarian. We'll talk about those traits here in a few minutes. Now, between 8000 BCE and 3000 BCE is what we would call the archaic time period. Archaic time period, there's still some hunting and gathering, but they also began to have farming. As such, the community can be sedentary. That means they stay in one place. Additionally, it also means that because of these opportunities, they can support a larger population. They also can begin to support more developed language, meaning there begins to be a sense of literacy among the elites, among the shaman or the chiefs of the tribe, of the community. So the date that's separating primal from archaic, this 8000 BCE, an event takes place known as the Agricultural Revolution. Now, it's not that all over the world, every community, every society experienced the agricultural revolution at the same time. The fact is, in some parts of the world, we begin to see agriculture going back to 10,000, maybe, possibly even earlier. There are other places where, even in modern times, the tribe is still displaying traits that are more primal. They don't really have, the revolution of farming hasn't quite come on. But from the anthropological, the archaeological look or history, we look and see that around 8000 BC is when many cultures around the world begin to have this ability to farm, the beginning of agriculture. Now, there's one more date between 3000 and 1000 BCE. This is called the historic time period. This is the advent of our major world civilizations, ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, the ancient Harappa civilization, ancient China, begin to come on the scene as more organized, structured civilizations with literacy, more advanced literacy than what was found in the archaic time period, with establishing organized societies, cultures, and trade. Now, there's one other time period that I would like you to be aware of, and it exists before the Common Era. It's a 600-year time period from 800 BCE, so before the Common Era, to 200 BCE. And it's known as the Axial Age. There is a scholar, his name is Carl Jaspers, and Carl Jaspers realized that around the world, many cultures, religions, were solidifying their beliefs in this small little 600-year time period. They may have been solidifying their beliefs, or they were changing and new ideas were coming out. As examples, if we look at the Eastern religions, this is when the Upanishads are written in Hinduism, when Mahavira appears and begins Jainism, where Siddhartha comes on the scene, and eventually Buddhism. It's a time period of Confucius and Lao Tzu. In the Western religions, this is the time period in Judaism of the prophet books, those of Ezekiel and Isaiah, predicting the concepts of a coming Messiah. It's also a time period of Plato and Socrates. So it's this time period, this axial age, where what we call our major world religions begin to develop or possibly be predicted and become solidified in their teachings. So those are the main dates that I would like you to know in regards to just general course information. As we move through the religions, I will refer back, especially during this Bible time period, to primal and archaic. You will want to make sure you know the difference between those two, which we will touch on one more time, and also make sure you know that axial age. We'll talk about it when we go into Hinduism and Buddhism and Confucianism, Taoism, and to Judaism, into Zoroastrianism. So please keep those dates in mind, not just for this section, section 1, but in and throughout the rest of our course. Now, from there, what we want to think about is specifically our timeline for tribal religions. Now, if you have the textbook, again, Invitation World Religions, you should turn to page 33. Now, I'm not really going to come through and address every one of the dates that shows up in this timeline. You should read through the history that is provided for you in the textbook. There will be a couple questions about events that have taken place. Now, just a couple dates that I would like to touch on. They appear in the PowerPoint. So when you go and open the PowerPoint, they will be right there so that you don't have to worry about being able or not being able to see the board that is beside me. All right, so the first date is really going to be a date for, well, as it puts it, and this is the date that's actually listed in the textbook, is roughly around 20,000 years ago, which is when anthropologists believe humans migrated to the Americas from Asia. Now, of course, there's also other theories that perhaps almost that same time, maybe a little bit more recent, you also have migrations that would have came across from other places. There's a lot of research going into looking at the DNA of tribes across America and figuring out what some of their background is. Now, from there, one thing that I'd like you to know is about the year 6000 BCE, because this is when the Wapo tribe shows up in Northern California. It is not just a smaller nomadic type of tribe, it actually becomes a large-scale tribe, civilization that leads to numerous other groups coming out after them. Now, you've probably heard of the Mayan civilization, but the Mayans don't actually come on the scene until roughly around 300 of the Common Era. Really, the civilization that preceded them was as massive, if not slightly larger at certain points in its time, and also built massive structures. And that would be the Olmec civilization. Now, the Olmec civilization dates back possibly as early as about 1500 BCE. And there's some debate that even before the Olmec civilization, you had these different tribal groups that existed in that region. And archaeologists are still looking to try and figure that out. Now, if we go up to about 800 of the Common Era, we begin to see what's known as the Mississippian era. This Mississippian era is when you begin to see the central parts of North America be populated with larger tribes, tribes that are moving from what we would call primal traits to archaic traits. Now, if we go back a little bit further west, we can see the pueblos of the American Southwest forming, and also one of the most amazing sights to behold. If you go on Google and do a search, or if you ever get the opportunity, go check out some of the mesas, some of the cliffs that exist, that were created by the pueblos. These cliff palaces that were anywhere from 2 to 5 stories almost high, built into the cliffs. Now, mind you, this idea of cliff building actually didn't just happen in North America. Now, the dates are not quite the same time period, it's a little bit earlier, but scholars have also, or archaeologists have also found these same types of cave cliffs that are built underground in regions such as Turkey. So, coming back over towards the U.S. or towards North America, there's a number of tribes that are called the Algonquin-speaking tribes, the Mohegan tribes. Now, these tribes get split into a number of different groups. This is said to be one of the root tribes, are the Algonquin-speaking. So you would have things like the Onondagan, you would have the Seneca, the Cayuga, the Oneida, the Mohawks, and other confederacies, five-nation confederacy, and supporting tribes around them. Now, this is really when we see a lot of the history. If you look at your timeline in the textbook, you'll notice that many of the dates actually don't come in until about the year 1050, with the pueblos being built in the American Southwest, and then the Aztec civilizations. And then it starts talking about the influence from the Europeans coming in, Columbus with the arriving, and the Spanish arriving. Now, one interesting point that shows up is here in the Tampa Bay area, we actually have the earliest settlement. Yes, before St. Augustine. And it's over in St. Petersburg. It's called Sacred Land Preservation. It's located just south of about 22nd Avenue. So it's around I believe around 18th or 15th Avenue in St. Pete. And there's only one small little marker that describes this little inlet in this place where some of the earliest settlers arrived. And apparently there even had been a Christian missionary that arrived around that same time. So here in the Tampa Bay area, we actually have a decent amount of history going back to these first settlers coming in from Spain. With that, you also have different tribes such as the Tocobago. You have the mound at Philippi Park. So these are some of the places you might actually want to check out that tell you a bit of the history of tribal America here in Florida. Now, going back to these Algonquin-speaking tribes, I'm not sure if he's coming down every year at this point, but the South Shore campus usually has a gentleman, Anwan Whedon, who comes down around November, and he gives a wonderful lecture. And he starts off by asking if anybody knows the name of the tribe that the Pilgrims met. here is this American religion event. You know, the religion of America, just like the Super Bowl is this huge, massive religious event, we would say that so is Thanksgiving, full of myth and story and sacred meaning and rituals and community. And we start learning about Thanksgiving when we're really little. But I wonder how many actually know the name of the tribe. Usually in the classes that meet on campus, there might be 1 or 2 people out of a class of 30. Not many. So what is the tribe? They're known as the Pequot. They don't sound like ones that you've ever heard of. Now you might have heard of the Mohegan, or Pocahontas and that story, but it's actually the Pequot that were there at the first Thanksgiving. Now what happened at this first Thanksgiving? Well, we should remember the story. That part is somewhat accurate about the first Thanksgiving, that the tribal group, the Pequots, were giving food and help to these pilgrims that were coming over. But do you know what happened the second and third subsequent years? One reason that the Pequot are not often heard of or talked about is because they're very small at this point. Why? Because they were slaughtered and killed in the Thanksgivings that took place after that first one. And not only that, a number of them, in fact, it's not just Pequots, but other tribes of North America, of the northeast part of the U.S., were often taken as slaves down to the Caribbean, which will influence those religions as well. Now, there's a few other dates that I want you to understand, and it goes beyond just a date. It's an event that you need to make sure that you read about in the textbook, and it's called the ghost dance. The ghost dance is a reactionary dance. It was in response to the government coming in and taking over the land and not honoring treaties. Now, this has been a common event that's happened over and over again. It happened and led to the Trail of Tears, which you should try and read about the Trail of Tears. We'll have a chance to mention it when we go through other parts of this lecture. But in regards to the ghost dance, so if you look in your book, and it starts around 1870 and starts on page 46 of chapter 2. So the idea of this ghost dance wasn't a war dance. They weren't calling out for violence or anything. The ghost dance was to try to bring about the spirits of those who had passed to strengthen the tribe and make them stronger. It was interpreted as a very violent war dance and was essentially shut down. There will be questions on the test about the ghost dance, so please make sure you read that section, pages 45, 46, and 47 even, about responses by Native Americans. So that also will include the peyote church and that material. All right, that wraps up our basic timeline. Please make sure that you read the book, and I will see you shortly in the next video on Tribal America. Thank you.